Chivalry 2 catapults you onto stylish, saturated battlefields with up to 64 players in objective-based team modes or a giant free-for-all. An excellent compromise between hack-and-slash fun and skill-based medieval melee makes the medieval brawls in Chivalry 2 a ton of fun. While other first-person sword fighting games like Mordor and Kingdom Come Deliverance have tried to sell themselves on the realism of their hitboxes, or the high skill ceilings of their combat systems, Chivalry Medieval Warfare has always been unashamed to fall a bit more on the arcadey side. Its sequel, Chivalry 2, continues that tradition, and for that reason it is actually a better multiplayer experience because of that philosophy. Rather than having you build out a complex custom kit with all the exact weapons and armor you want, Chivalry has 12 set classes divided into 4 archetypes, with 4 available at the start and the rest unlocked as you go. In another clever bit of design, you recharge powers faster by doing things your class is good at and should be doing anyway. Whether you are swinging a sword or plucking away with a bow, combat hits that elusive sweet spot between accessible dumb fun and rewarding, skill-based mechanics where the wheat is separated from the chaff. Kingdoms and Castles is a fun and breezy medieval city builder. Farm, mine, and build an adorable town while defending against dragons, Vikings, and unhappy peasants. You can play Kingdoms and Castles without threats, if you prefer a completely peaceful experience, or with occasional threats, or with more frequent ones for a greater challenge. One task in Kingdoms and Castles naturally leads to the next, and soon your town has grown. Its streets are filled with little characters dashing here and there with goods on their backs, and you're planning a new expansion out east. Most of the time these games reach a point and then keep layering on complexity. This game stays relatively easy and won't burden you with a ton of mechanics and statistics. There are also disasters, of a sort. Winter comes each year, and if your crops aren't stored in time, they'll perish in the cold. Heavy rains can flood your farms and stop crops from growing at all, and lightning strikes can cause fires. The people who live in your city and follow your commands do have a happiness meter, and they can despair and decide to leave town. Overall, this good feeling and relaxing city builder is a casual dive into a nice and friendly medieval game world. Wartales is a tactical RPG in a sandbox open world. It has a dark tone and has perma-death mechanics for every member of your mercenary band. Wartales' core gameplay loop involves traveling on a vast map from one key location to another, stopping by a town to recuperate between missions. Players progress the story either by taking up contracts or by buying information from brokers using influence. Quests are mostly completed through combat, which puts the player on a grid-based battlefield. The player's party takes turns with the AI in moving their units and taking action. The game has 2 separate difficulty settings for its turn-based combat and its survival simulation. Don't be fooled by its drab exterior. Wartales is a deep and richly rewarding exercise in party creation. All in all, it is similar to Battle Brothers and shines with its hard and engaging battles and mercenary management. It's very easy to sink dozens of hours playing this game, but rarely have I played a game that doesn't move much in terms of progression even with that much time investment put into it. It has tons of potential as long as the developers manage to continue iterating the design to make it more engaging. Kingdom Come Deliverance comes really close to a realistic and historically accurate role-playing game of 15th century feudal Bohemia. It is an RPG without the dungeons or dragons. The simulation that governs everything is impressively deep. If you get caught stealing, you'll end up serving some time in jail. If you unsheathe your sword during a fist fight, your opponent will back down and maybe even apologize. Like many games with this level of ambition, Kingdom Come is plagued by bugs. The simulation is dense and complex, but also feels like it could collapse at any second. A good variety of quests keeps things interesting, from large battles and castle sieges, to more sedate activities such as hunting, settling disputes, and robbing wine cellars for drunken lords. Deliverance satisfies that itch if you are looking for something a little different than typical Western high fantasy or Japanese-style RPGs. It's rough around the edges and some narrative and mechanical quirks don't always hit their mark, but it's still an enjoyable experience if you can put up with a little bit of unevenness. Total War Medieval 2 is a grand strategy game with real-time battles and a turn-based world map. You play the Grand Campaign as one of the many historic factions of the late Middle Ages, from Britain via Venice to Moors. Your goal is to capture 45 regions plus one of the special cities like Rome or Jerusalem, which depend on the faction. You need to raise armies, build and maintain your cities, keep the people happy with low taxes and religion, escape the scrutiny of the Inquisition if you happen to be playing as one of the Catholic nations, defeat the Mongol invasion, and destroy your rivals, from rebels to fickle and avaricious neighbors. Medieval 2 is an excellent strategy game. There's just so much here to occupy you for hours. At the same time, you'll need to be committed to get through the campaign, as it can take up a lot of time. The AI is smart enough to probe for weaknesses in your defenses and then attack if you're not careful, so you need to keep your guard up at all times. If you're a strategy fan looking for an epic experience, you will love Total War Medieval 2 due to the rich historical and popular setting, beautiful visuals, and deep gameplay. AoE 4 is a historical real-time strategy game that takes place in the medieval era. You take control of one of history's great civilizations and build up from a humble village into a mighty empire, improving your economy and waging war with your enemies along the way. Between weekly challenges, multiplayer seasons and 2 brand new playable civilizations, it's a good time to be a fan of Age of Empires 4. Like many competitive online games, AoE still has an active player base and a steady drip feed of new content. Like the other campaigns in AoE 4, The Rise of Moscow is an excellent journey, combining varied and challenging gameplay objectives with real-world documentary footage. Age of Empires 4 proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that in the right developer's hands, a modern RTS is possible. You won't have a problem with ranked ladder matchmaking, and balance seems to be in a decent place. Age of Empires is not an easy game, and it requires a significant amount of skill to play on hard or even intermediate difficulties. Starting Age of Empires 4 on the lowest difficulty level is the best way to learn the game and keep it enjoyable. Medieval Dynasty is a survival simulator where you take on the role of a soldier returning from war only to discover that your family has died, and you'll now need to make a new life for yourself by building a settlement, raising a family, and eventually starting your own medieval dynasty. Most of the game is focused on creating, building, and surviving rather than combat. Medieval Dynasty is a slow-paced game in which you walk around chatting to NPCs, hunt for food, and gather resources for your settlement. Those who enjoy games like Minecraft and The Forest will find a lot to like, and Medieval Dynasty can be a very relaxing experience as gameplay is incredibly deep and detailed. If you enjoy survival games and take pleasure in the gathering of crafting materials and seeing something grow, you will get a lot out of this game. If you're the sort of player who spends more time building settlements in Fallout than you do shooting raiders, or someone who spent hours building and furnishing the perfect lodge in Skyrim, then you'll love Medieval Dynasty. This game is more of a life simulator than an adventure, but will be a good choice for all medieval fans who appreciate games with love for detail in this era. A Plague Tale Requiem eventually expands in scope and improves upon its predecessor's stealth action, but the heart-rending story of 2 siblings battling against the odds is where it truly excels. This game is gorgeous, especially when exploring its brightly lit, masterfully detailed wilderness areas. Whereas A Plague Tale Innocence was dark and gloomy, A Plague Tale Requiem is vibrant and full of life, which actually amplifies its more sinister moments. There's some incredible attention to detail, with injuries the characters sustain remaining visible through the duration of the game, and little touches in the level design to help each area feel not only distinct from one another, but also alive. Requiem has more action than its predecessor, resulting in faster-paced and more engaging moment-to-moment gameplay. This game is still primarily a linear experience, but it offers far more freedom than the original game. A Plague Tale, Innocence was recognized for its well-written characters and engrossing narrative, and Requiem is even better. Requiem is everything that one could want from a sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence. It's more ambitious and action-packed than Innocence, and is quite easily one of the best games in this genre. Crusader Kings III is a simulation strategy game which any person who is interested in historical rulers would play for hours. The gameplay doesn't disappoint, with a clean layout of the world, relatively simple controls and a very nice design. Crusader Kings III is a sensational historically accurate strategy and simulation RPG. It is the type of game that once you figure out what you are doing, you can play for hours on end, Battle and marrying your way into being a strong leader, either changing the events of the past by playing as an original king or queen, or by creating your very own character to take history by the scruff of its neck and grow your kingdom to its fullest. One area of criticism is that for wars, they could have added something a bit more interactive and visually enthralling as opposed to the progress bar style that they have opted for. Crusader Kings III is a superb strategy game, a great RPG, and a masterclass in how to take the best parts of existing systems and make them deeper and better. All of the engrossingly flawed characters and stories of love, war, triumph, and loss that can dynamically emerge feel like just to be so close to medieval history. Bannerlords setup is a dream come to life, splicing together role-playing, strategy and medieval duels in a big all-sandbox. It's Chivalry, Crusader Kings and Total War in a single expansive package. There isn't actually much management involved in running towns and castles. You hop in, pick a construction project and then make sure there aren't any issues needing dealt with in the villages connected to them. You control your character directly in battle, unless you're just sending in your troops alone, the equivalent of an auto-battle option. Fights are simultaneously precise and messy. Treat the game like a war sandbox where you dip into trade, management and politics and it starts to make a lot more sense, and feels more satisfying as a result. Bannerlord remains a massively engaging romp that produces some of the most impressive battles in gaming. Despite some shallow ancillary systems, Bannerlord is the master of medieval warfare. Its time-sink campaign will eat away at your life without you knowing it. Yes, it was rough around the edges, and the multiplayer skirmish won't be for everyone, but it ticks many boxes along the way.